medicine is a messy business, both physically and emotionally. Vetsplaining is one veterinarian's attempt to explain and understand her own profession a little better. Join Dr. Lisa McFadden as she delves deep into the medical and business aspects of veterinary medicine. Welcome back. This is part 2 of my 2-part interview series with Dr. Susan Hopper, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what it means to be a clinical director for PetWell Partners.
Well, and I like the Hopper reports that you do. How did you think about doing those?
Well, from my experience working for a corporation that got pretty large, I always felt a disconnect from what was going on outside of my own clinic, and also with the home office. And I'm really big on transparency and really over communication. I don't know in any aspect of our lives that we can over communicate. And so I also wanted to get to know people. You know, I come in, every 5 or 6 weeks. I might talk to you on the phone. How else can we have a little deeper conversation about communication and interaction? And again, how can we utilize all of these people and their rich experiences? And we have such a diverse background. It's interesting. I'll have to show you my spreadsheet, but I kept track of everybody's workplace personality style. And we've got some directors, we've got some analyzers, we have a couple socializers, which I will do a shout out to Daisy, our coach for PetWell. She's a socializer, which probably doesn't make not a big surprise to anybody. And, we have, relators. So we have this wonderful richness of personalities there. And I really wanted to, through the Hopper report, not just communicate things that are going on, just also create a community between all of us. Because how else do you get to talk to somebody in Austin, Texas, and express what's going on with you? How can we create that support? And I thought a Hopper report would be just one way of, quickly, hey, I'm a director. This is what it means to me. Or hey, this is a challenge that I have with my boundaries. Just something short and sweet that we could all share a little bit. And so then when we do get together, just one more way of creating those relationships.
And are they going to everybody or just your pride of the 14 clinics? Okay. And then I send them to the operation managers, and I send them to David Mervin and Daisy, and then Robin Paddock. And I don't know if Robin, I'm always happy to share. I don't know if Robin shares that with her group or not. I started it off that way, and happy to share it with anybody that would like to participate and read it. And that goes to the practice managers too. And sometimes they interject things. And, again, every job is important, and everyone can continue to learn and grow as people. And, maybe that helps them on their journey. If so, that's my goal. Well, and the emails usually start with this is what the topic is, a little bit of background information or a video that you saw. And then you request that we respond.
Yeah.
Which topics have you gotten the most response from?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I would say I'm getting less this summer. I think everyone's busier this summer. I think the boundaries question was a really good one. We had a lot of people sharing about how they create, like we were talking about the other day, a work-life balance, mm-hmm. How we create that, how are we mindful of that, and what do we do to help? And then the workplace personality one, I had pretty much everybody respond. I think I only had maybe 1 or 2 people that didn't. Lots of comments there. And then one of the practice managers actually took that, and she did the quiz with her own staff. And then they actually had a discussion about how do we talk to a person that is a different personality style than ourselves. And I thought that was really great. And they had a good conversation about the team functioning and how it relates to culture. So that really, I really felt honored by her taking that to the next step.
Well, that's great. I think it's interesting to see who responds. Like, I don't respond all the time.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to, but just because sometimes I'm working on my listening. But I think it's cool to see how everybody interprets. I also think it's a neat sociologic experiment because veterinarians, in my opinion, are always one-uppers. Like we get in a group and we tell a story and we're like, I had to do this animal on this cat that hadn't pooped in 3 days. And then someone's like, they hadn't pooped in a month. And, it just always gets higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
And,
ooh, that's a good topic. I'm writing this down.
One-uppers?
That's a good topic. Well, yeah, empathy and one-upping and things like that. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like we want to relate, but we also want, I don't know, it's like every veterinarian doesn't realize it, but they all want to be like, I walked both ways uphill barefoot to work, only wearing a lab coat, like there's something primal.
I think you might get arrested for that. Yeah.
There's like something like almost sadist about being a veterinarian in the sense that, and that's why it's so interesting to see work-life balance become so popular, because so many veterinarians push themselves constantly with like very little sleep, no breaks, always at work, always on call. It's not like we do it for the money. So you then get a bunch of veterinarians together and then they all want to one-up each other. And so then when you send out these Hopper reports that are about like, compassion fatigue and work-life balance and the one you just did about continuing education, sometimes I just like watching people one-up each other. And I don't think they do it on purpose. Like, I don't think they know that they're doing it. And the ones where you ask for advice on like, basically it boils down to how to be a better person, right? Whether it's compassion fatigue or work-life balance or anger or mindfulness, it's like they start one-upping each other on like, no, I'm the most mindful, like I meditate for 5 hours a day, like it's just very, I don't know. I think it's very interesting. So I don't know if you ever thought of it that way, but the next time you see like the chain of responses, just watch. It's like everyone tries to one-up each other.
I'll look at that. I guess I'm just so happy if people share.
Yeah, no, I just think it's funny.
I'm happy that I get any response. So I'll have to be mindful of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to observe like how people interact with their environments and how they interact with their situation. So when you first sent them out, like, I would respond only because not a lot of people would respond. So I was like, cool, I'll, test the waters and get people to try and respond. And then now that other people respond, I'm kind of like sitting back and just looking to see what they write.
Yeah, and you made me think, since we're using the Microsoft Teams more, I could start putting that on Teams, and then that would go out to all the doctors in Petwell. I'd like to include the practice managers though too, because again, they're part of our teams, and they do their own culture activities, and I think there's value in including them in that information too. So I guess I could post on their Teams page too.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I have to think about that. You gave me something to think about.
Ways. Yeah, I mean, personally, I would say so. Like the culture activities, because they used to have the medical directors on those practice, like the Thursday whatever meetings, and then the medical directors just like couldn't reliably come. So now it's more just practice managers, and I think operations managers, and those are the ones like run by Charlotte usually. And that's where they come up with the culture activity. And usually we do them at a staff meeting and Jess tells me about it beforehand. So I know like what the activity is. But it's almost like because it's being presented by the practice manager, it's their thing,
Yeah.
And the medical directors don't really have a thing. So if you kept it as medical directors only and then almost like every other month said, all right, this topic, we want you to think about it, share it with your practice manager, and then share it with your team. It's more like we have our own club,
Well, that's a good point you bring up. And that's one thing I was curious about is, would the medical directors want to get together by Skype or Zoom or something like that
once a month and have an hour. I don't know how we would all do it with 41 something practices. So the logistics, you and I immediately go to the logistics of it. Is there a value to having an hour a month or so where we share, maybe we share cases, or, hey, ProHeart just came out, ProHeart 12 just came out on the market. We could do almost anything. I'm wondering, do the medical directors need to interact with each other in some sort of format?
I think it'd be interesting. I think it would be neat to see what happened. I think it could go either way. Like, we'll either say nothing, or like people like me who are just outspoken and loud will talk, and then all the introverts will sit there and listen.
Yeah, and I'm sure you see it with doing these Skype remotely. It's hard when you get more than 10 people or so. I won't put an exact number on it. If we had 41 people, I have noticed that people do sit back more than when there's maybe like 3 or 4 people on a remote meeting. There's a safety in numbers, I suppose, to borrow that cliche. And would we get interaction?
I think if you forced it, like if, every once a month there were like 3 or 4 clinics that, like they do with the practice managers, because now it used to be everybody would talk, right? But then only like the same 3 people would talk. So now I think Charlotte has specific clinics that have to talk about it, and then other people can talk about, once those few clinics have said how the experiment went, then if other people want to share, they can. But I think it would be interesting. You could do, because you could do it a lot of different ways. Like you could do, M&M or morbidity mortality rounds,
right?
New products. Or even if you wanted, like, let's say you had four topics you wanted to cover every time, right? Like, so new products, interesting case of the month, and M&M rounds, right? So a case where it's a learning experience doesn't necessarily mean that anybody messed up. It's just one where when you think about it, you're like, oh, if I see it again, I might do this differently. And then you have like a emotional topic, and like each time a medical director from each clinic is responsible for presenting that thing,
Yeah, like an EQ topic, an emotional intelligence topic.
Yeah, that. But, so then like the first time we meet, like Dr. McFadden from Independent Hill talks about a new product on the market. And then, you know what I mean? Like, and then it's forced interaction. I don't know.
Yeah, you give me a lot to think about. And that's why a reason I sent out that last report about, where do we get our information from? Because, I've had some doctors comment about, well, the sales rep told me one thing, and I find out, well, they're a bit biased towards their product. And how do we get information? Do we believe a colleague? Do we believe someone that's been out of school maybe 25 years and that has or hasn't kept up with the latest information? Where do we get our information, and how do we know that it's valuable? And because there is an art of practice as well as a science, and where is that area that's that in between?
Yeah, I'm inherently skeptical of all salespeople. So.
Yeah.
I'm notoriously hard on all of our drug reps.
Yeah. Well, my husband worked, he works for IDEX right now. And he worked for Marial for about 10 years now, BI. And so I've seen the other side of things, let's just say. It gives an interesting perspective on people that are trained in sales versus people that are trained in medicine and surgery. And sometimes there is a disconnect.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like if your job is to sell a product, you should know everything about that product.
Yeah.
And so like no question should be a curveball, you know? So like we had somebody come and talk to us about a certain type of probiotic on Friday. And she said, as you guys know, you're going to want to give this probiotic 4 hours post antibiotics. And for that,